Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, July 28th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. Ohio State's football team is in the middle of its first week of walkthroughs that started last Friday, is set to run through August 6th. The next steps towards the season will come when the Big Ten drops its conference-only 2020 schedule. That and the dates of the conference media days are kind of the next things to keep an eye on. Those haven't come out yet. So while we're waiting on those, it's a great time to talk some recruiting. Buckeye Scoop recruiting analyst Marc Givler joins us this morning. He just wrote about one of the top remaining targets on Ohio State's board for 2021, offensive lineman Tristan Leigh. He's a five-star prospect from Virginia, which is a state that is not playing high school football this fall. So, Mark, what is Tristan planning to do about that?
Yeah, we kind of talked about this a little bit over the weekend when I was interviewing him, and we were kind of chatting about that a little bit. The Virginia vote coming up, which obviously happened on Monday, pushing high school football, or I believe all fall sports in the state, back. I don't think he's made any final decisions. I think he knew it was getting pushed back, even though the vote hadn't happened yet. So there was that understanding, and I don't think he has made any final call on that. But my sense is that he's probably going to do the Trevion Henderson route and just kind of train. Now that could change. I mean, it's easy for them to say that right now, and as things start to pick up here in a couple of weeks, hopefully, around the country, maybe some minds change and some anxiety sets in on missing out on a senior season, and things get switched around there. But it didn't sound to me like he was going to participate in a Virginia high school football season that didn't start on time. And it sounded to me like he was leaning toward just kind of hanging out and staying in shape and training. And he told me he's been focusing a lot on his academics lately so that he can possibly enroll early in January. So that would seem to be the clubhouse leader right now, is to just go the Trevion Henderson route and, just get in shape and focus on academics and recruiting. And we'll just have to see now that the vote is official, and I'm sure there's going to be some high schole programs reaching out to him. I'm sure there's going to be some of that going on with maybe some prep schools and things like that. Didn't seem like he was too concerned about having to play anywhere this fall, and we'll kind of see what he decides here the next week or two.
Yeah, and the next question I'm going to ask you is a question that doesn't have an answer, so we'll just preface it with that. But there's a really interesting kind of dynamic working with kids who might enroll early next spring, where there's some thought that if for some reason they're not able to play a football season this fall and they end up playing it in the spring, could some of those early enrollee kids potentially get on the field as, like pre-true freshmen almost. And that's going to be something that, there's 5 or 6 different things that would have to happen before that could happen. And, that could be something that if, for example, your NFL draft picks are all moving on and, Justin Fields decides he's not going to play in a spring season because he's going to go into the NFL draft, maybe you can replace them with some of your early enrollees. That's something that, there's like 5 or 6 different things that would have to happen before that, that came into play. But that's something that I wonder if in the back of anyone's mind, if that's something that they're at least thinking about right now, that might make enrolling early maybe even more appealing for some of these kids.
Yeah, I think when you ask these guys on the record, I mean, generally they're not going to go too far down that rabbit hole. I think a lot of them are like, we're not too worried about that. I do think there is something to that, and to that point, I think there almost has to be something like that put in place. Now, just kind of full disclosure here, I think the idea of college football in the spring is completely insane. So I don't think it's particularly realistic. I think it's, not to completely derail the topic here, but I think we're talking, when you talk about player safety, what could be more unsafe than having people play 2 football seasons in about a 9-month stretch? So I think it's kind of nuts personally, but if sanity doesn't win out and they decide to actually delay a season into the spring, I think there would have to be something in place like that, because I think all of these Power 5 programs would lose every, it's not just, everyone's like, well, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. It is not just those guys. It is the 3rd and 4th and 5th round draft picks that are not going to risk physical injury a couple months away from reporting to an NFL training camp. They're just not going to do it. And so there would be these gaps on these rosters, and I think that would be the logical thing, would be to kind of fill it with guys like that. So, how much of that is truly at play here, I don't know, but it has to be something that at least sits in the back of the mind of these kids.
Yeah, we will have plenty of shows between now and some kind of a theoretical spring season, if it does come to that, to sort all of that out. And yeah, I'm with you that is not necessarily nearly as clean and simple a solution as some people might want it to be right now. But back to Tristan Leigh, his top 5 right now: Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma. It sounded like he was hoping to still visit all of them this fall whenever the NCAA opens visits back up again. What does his decision timetable look like right now?
Yeah, he's pretty patient, it sounds like. I pressed him really on that. I really pressed him on that, because what we're seeing right now is kids there are 3 ways to kind of react to the unknown of visits this fall, because the NCAA hasn't commented any further other than that it's a dead period through August 31st, and we have no idea if things are going to open September 1st or if they're going to come in again here in the next couple of weeks and say, well, actually, we're going to extend this through the end of September or the end of October. And then it just becomes a never-ending cycle as they've continued to extend this dead period further and further. But there's kind of 3 different lines of thinking. There's the kids who have said, well, I'm tired of waiting, I'm just committing. And we've seen most of the kids who are going to do that already. Then there comes the group of, well, I'm going to at least wait and see what they do about this August 31st. And, if I like how things sound here in a few weeks, I'll continue to wait, and then I'll make my visits and then decide. And then there's the kids, and I think Tristan's in this category of, I don't really care when they decide, as long as they, eventually do decide. And so I think he's waiting. I don't think there's like an expiration date for him. I don't think there's a time, where it's like mid-October, say, and he's like, well, they still haven't opened up visits. I'm done waiting. I'm just going to commit somewhere right now. I think he's of the mindset that if he has to wait all the way until he plays in the All-American Bowl in San Antonio in January, I think he's of the mindset that if he has to wait until January to make an announcement, that he'll do that. And if he can, if he has to wait until December to squeeze in some visits, that he'll do that. I don't get the sense that he needs there to be visits in September or October, like some of these other kids. I think some of these other kids, if there's not visits by the end of September, I think you could see a rush of commitments again in September of kids who are just like, I'm sick of waiting. But I don't think Tristan's in that category at this point.
Well, Ohio State is in his top 5 right now, but with Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma in that group, I mean, the crystal balls are all over the place with him. Where do you see the Buckeyes falling in that top 5 right now, and what do you think are the deciding factors that may end up, deciding where he ends up going?
Yeah, I think everyone is chasing LSU right now, but I think the good news for Ohio State is that I like where they're at now versus where they were at maybe 3 months ago. I think a lot has changed since then. Ohio State missing on J.C. Latham would help here. I never saw them at the same school. They had a lot of overlap on their short lists, and I just never saw that as a thing. So I think as long as Latham's at Alabama, that Leigh is probably not going to Alabama, especially with what we've seen Alabama add recently. So I think Alabama is actually running 5th. I think Oklahoma and Clemson are intriguing. I think Clemson has actually slipped a little bit, maybe from what they were at 3 or 4 months ago. And, I could argue that Ohio State's running 2nd right now. I think that may very well be the case. Is that as positive as it sounds? Maybe not, because I actually think LSU has a decent lead right now. But, they've definitely made up some ground. And even Tristan, told me over the weekend, he said, things really have picked up during the quarantine, especially during the quarantine, but, probably the later parts of the quarantine. He's been getting on his Zoom calls with Greg Sedgwick and Ryan Day. And, they've kind of been showing him a lot of stuff, little tips, little, how he coaches. There's a lot of different little insights into the program. He's really appreciated that. The one thing I think Ohio State clearly has going for it is that he told, again, these are his words, not mine, that Ohio State has the best, offers the best educational opportunities for him of his finalists, and that he believes Ohio State has the best business school of his finalists, which is what he kind of wants to get into. So they have some things working. LSU getting 2 visits early, including a camp where he got to work with the coaching staff, which he said still resonates with him. There's such a strong comfort level there. I think that's going to be tough to overcome, especially if there's no visits. I think Ohio State has to get him back on campus, and for a real visit, not just, the Penn State game was great last year, but I think they need him on campus for the full thing, the life after football components, the academic presentations, the, getting with the coaches, sitting in on some meetings, whatever it is. I think they need the full, 3-day, 2.5-day official visit type thing. And that's going to be a key for them to have a chance here. He won't come right out and say it, but I do think playing time, depth charts are playing a pretty big factor here as well. And I think that's why LSU and Ohio State have started, LSU's at the top, and I think that's why Ohio State's picked up some momentum as well, is because you can kind of look at the class and say, Ben Crispin could be a guard, Donovan Jackson could be a guard. They don't, there's some opportunity there at tackle. Ohio State, LSU both have some opportunity at tackle, both nationally prominent programs. And, I think, Clemson as well is intriguing there. I just didn't get the same Clemson vibes from him in this last conversation that I did, in previous, conversations we've had. So it'll be interesting. It's going to be a fun one if there's visits. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you mentioned the role that, Alabama landing J.C. Latham could have in Tristan Leigh's recruitment. But Monday afternoon, there was another player whose name came up that could potentially impact that decision. That player is a 2023 tackle named Aiden Lee, who just is Tristan Leigh's younger brother. And the Buckeyes offered him a scholarship Monday afternoon. And then in just an absolutely staggering coincidence, an hour and a half later, LSU offered him as well. We've seen OSU send out offers to brothers. They had both Max Ray and Jake Ray committed at the same time a couple of years before. Jake ended up going to Colorado. Max is still on the Buckeyes. But in general, is this something that could have an impact on Tristan Leigh's recruitment, or is this just kind of like a fun side story?
I think it's probably just a fun side story. I think, I think it's a nice little gesture by the two programs to, kind of maybe, gather some favor with the family or whatever. I don't want to take anything away from Aiden. He's not so much different from Tristan. I think the thought process there is, Tristan was kind of a late developer physically. He kind of grew into his body late, and Aiden is, probably around the same size Tristan was a couple years back. So I think there's a lot of projecting going on there in terms of what Aiden might look like in 3 years, because right now he's a 6'4", 225-pound offensive lineman. So he's obviously going to have to grow or fill out quite a bit. So I think there was a little bit of gamesmanship here, and also some projecting long-term in terms of, okay, well, you kind of saw Tristan go from kind of a skinny, smaller guy to this kind of beast he is now. And maybe Aiden follows that same physical growth pattern. And if you get in there early, versus, trying, a lot of schools were kind of late to the party on Tristan Leigh. Maybe you get in early on Aiden. If he takes the same development curve, you've helped yourself out tremendously by getting in there early. But yeah, I don't look at that as like a huge deal right now. I think, we just don't know what he's going to look like physically in 2 years. We don't know what they're about. We don't, a lot of these early offers out of state in general. It's not just not just Aiden. A lot of these early offers out of state are very simply, we're aware of you. We like what we've seen so far. Keep working. And then in a year or two, we'll figure out if we're serious about you. So it is what it is.
Yeah. So he's a 2023. They've got a little time to figure out, where he is and where he fits in their plans. But as they're working to wrap up the 2021 cycle, where does landing another top flight tackle, whether it's Lee or maybe flipping J.C. Latham back from Alabama, where does that rank on the list of the biggest positions where they have to do, they have to land some kind of a big time player in this cycle?
I think it's probably at the top at this point. I mean, certainly you can look at the defensive line and, look at some of the guys they're in on there and especially Taiwan Malone, just because he's such a rare guy as a 300-pound athlete. But if you actually look at kind of the position of the offensive line, just in terms of how long it takes to develop guys, kind of what they did last year, where yes, Paris Johnson, great player, Luke Whippler, really good interior guy, but there's some unknowns in that class. They did miss on some numbers there in 18 and 19. So it's important to get some bodies in there at this point. It's important to land some big guys at tackle. I personally would put it at the top now that they've flipped Jordan Hancock. I would have said corner, a week or two ago or whatever. I would have said corner is finding one more elite guy there. But now I think it's tackle, because again, I think you just trust Larry Johnson at this stage. I think we've got enough evidence there to trust him. And I just think there's a little bit of, I want to call it uncertainty, but you look at this 6 months ago and they were going to get J.C. Latham, and maybe they were going to get Tristan Leigh too, and maybe they were going to get Jagger Burton or whoever it was. There was a lot of guys they were in on, and they've got two very good ones who may very well be guards, and it just comes down to that premium position of tackle. And I think they've got to have a slam dunk there.
Well, Marc, thank you for joining us this morning. You can find Marc's reporting, including some new information on top defensive back target Derek Davis and the likelihood of the Buckeyes potentially flipping another 5-star line prospect at BuckeyeScoop.com. He also co-hosts the Gives in the Bank podcast, and we plugged this yesterday, but their last episode was a position-by-position look at the Buckeyes 2021 recruiting class. That is definitely something you should check out. You can find that and all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or SoundCloud. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of our shows. And once you do that, make sure you subscribe, and please leave us a rating and review as well. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.